Hi guys, I am here at the True Story. This one is 4th century St. Ambrose, the quote before it. But if these beings guard you, they do so because they have been summoned by your prayers. And this one is called Angelic, Lifeguard. Kimberly Winters McJunkin and her sister Rachel had learned to swim in their hometown pool in Texas and were very assured around water. So when their family visited relatives in Alabama and the girls discovered that Mobile Bay was just behind their aunt's house, they were delighted. The next day, we loaded our swimming stuff in the car, Kimberly recalls. On impulse, my mother added my dad's swimming trunks. My dad is not a swimmer, but occasionally he wades on the shore. The family arrived at Aunt Ellen's house, where she and Mr. and Mrs. Winters and a neighbor got comfortable on the beach. Our younger brother played at the water's edge, but Rachel and I wanted to be in really deep water, Kimberly says. We walked out into the bay. It was a long trek. The area was quite shallow, and the girls kept going, wondering when they would be deep enough to swim. Look, Rachel laughed once she turned around. Everyone on shore looks like tiny dots. The adults had been talking amongst themselves, but eventually Aunt Ellen looked up and gasped. No one ever goes out that far. The girls should come back. It looks pretty shallow, Mrs. Winters observed. No, there's a steep drop-off somewhere out there, a ship's channel, and there are stingrays and jellyfish too. Aunt Ellen jumped up. Girls, turn around. Merle, Mrs. Winters turned to her husband. Could you? But Mrs. Winters was already heading for the house to change into his bathing trunks. Surely his daughters would hear Aunt Ellen, but he would go out to them anyway. But they hadn't. By the time I returned to the beach, only the girls' shoulders and heads were visible, Merle says. They were at least a half-mile from shore. He plunged into the water. Jellyfish, a sheer drop-off. He had to get their attention. Kimberly, Rachel, he shouted, but to no avail. The other adults watched in fear. Their carefree conversation had long since turned into prayer. By now, with the water over their heads, the girls were plunging into waves, skimming up and down and having a grand time. Occasionally, something brushed against their legs, but they weren't afraid. When they saw their father approaching, they were surprised. Dad, what are you doing here? Kimberly asked. You never go in the deep water. You're a little too far, Merle said calmly. Come closer to the beach. The girls obeyed. Merle waded back to the shore, and all was fine. If their father seemed more thoughtful than usual that evening, none of the children really noticed. But the following day, Merle decided to share something with his family. He had gone into the bay to call his daughters in. He reminded everyone, and then something had happened. Merle had seen a third person in the water with the girls. At first, he had assumed it was a neighbor and had wondered how she had gotten to his daughters ahead of him. But then he had realized that it wasn't her. This figure was a man, a young man, wearing a white t-shirt. The man did not seem to be talking with Kimberly and Rachel, or touching them as they skimmed up and down through the waves. Instead, he was swimming around them in a protective sort of arc. At times, he was between the girls, and at other times, I noticed he was on one side or the other, Merle says. He blinked, doubting what he saw. Was it a trick of sunlight? Was he seeing double? No, for if he was, he would be seeing 2 images of his daughters, and 2 of the man as well. further, the second image would be moving in synchronization with the first. Instead, all three figures were moving independently of one another. But who? The man continued to swim back and forth, watching the girls intently until Merle got just a few yards away. By then, only your heads were visible, Merle told his daughters. When you turned at the sound of my voice, I realized that the figure had vanished. Shocked, Kimberly thought of the brushes against her legs, the dangerous depths of the bay. What if she or Rachel had gotten a cramp or been bitten? In our eagerness to have fun, we had endangered our lives and we didn't know it, she says. But God chose this moment to reveal the fact that He was watching. And He still watches every day, even when we aren't in trouble. But just like them, a lot of people don't think that God's watching because they forget about God. They don't even think about God till something bad happens. Because they look for big signs and stuff. And then only certain people see things. But God's always there. And He's always watching over us. We have to watch out for each other too. God wants us to help each other, be there for each other. But He's always there for us too. Always watching over every single one of us. We are His children. He loves us. Good night, guys.